Welcome to the Life Self-Mastery Podcast, where we bring in entrepreneurs who have created online businesses and improved their lifestyles. Here's your host, Rohit Malhotra.
Hello everyone, I'm Rohit from lifeselfmastery.com, and today we have Jim Wang, who built a personal finance focused website, bargaineering.com, from a side hobby to a full-time income, which was eventually able to sell for a 7-figure profit in less than 5 years. Jim now runs Wallet Hacks. It's where he shares his strategies and tactics for getting ahead in finance and his life. Welcome to the show, Jim.
Rohit, thanks for having me, man. Pleasure to be here.
Can you share your journey on why you got into blogging and why did you start your previous website, bargaineering.com?
Yeah, so I started it in like the mid 2000s. And if anybody can remember back to that time, I mean, blogs were like personal journeys. Like they were like diaries. People wrote about what they ate, the things that they did, the problems that they had with their like spouse or their boyfriend, girlfriend. Like it was a very personal story. And there wasn't ever a sense that people were making money off of blogs. Like who makes money off their diary, right? So I was thinking, what was something that I was interested in? And I just started working, and the first day on the job, I get this employee manual, and it says, "Oh, you have to pick out the funds that you want to do for your retirement. You have to save money because you don't want to work, for the next 40 years, et cetera, et cetera." I'm like, I don't know any of this stuff. They didn't teach me any of this stuff in school. And so I started doing research online. I saw some people, writing about money, and these weren't experts. They weren't like financial advisors or brokers or anything like that. They were just regular people. And I thought, I can do this. Plus, the benefit was that I could write something that I thought was true. And then if other people read it and they're wrong, they can tell me and I can fix it. And eventually what happened is that I discovered all these other bloggers. There were maybe like 10 total. And we became friends, like internet friends. We had never met until many, many years later. And just over a few years, the site just grew and grew because there were other people just like me who didn't know what they were doing. And they were Googling and searching, and they were finding my site and others talking about the subjects that they were interested in. And over time, I was just able to earn an income from it through ads, through affiliate partnerships, and all these things that when I started, I had no idea that these things existed. But as you start doing it, once you get attention, one of the most valuable things anywhere is that once you get attention, other people that sort of want to piggyback on that will come out and tell you, hey, you have an audience. I'd love, if you think it's a good fit, if we promote this particular product. And so it was through a lot of those partnerships that I was able to earn a full-time income, quit my job, and then sort of be able to come on podcasts and talk about this entrepreneurial journey that I sort of fell into accidentally.
Interesting. So you sold your previous website for 7 figures. So why did you go on to sell your website, and what led to its growth?
It was two things. Like the growth was in part because people were, there were more people going on the internet. There were more people trusting the information that they found on the internet. And so it was just through that organic growth, I was able to grow the site, and it became appealing to another company to acquire it. I think there's always something to be said, about you build up an asset. You don't know, like the internet feels very tenuous. It's kind of like, right now, like Bitcoin, like one day it's 17,000, the next day it's 13,000, and then it's like 8,000. There was sort of a sense that it was easy come, easy go. And so part of the reason for, partnering up and divesting of the site was I was just thinking, sometimes it's just time to move on to the next thing and see what else is out there. And in the process, take a little bit of money off the table and de-risk the future so that I would make sure that, I was working on the site at the time full time for about 2 or 3 years. And so it was the sense that, I don't want to go back to working a full-time job, reporting to a boss, like saying yes when I thought the answer was no, or saying no when I thought the answer was yes. I wanted to avoid that. And so by divesting myself of the site, it was sort of an ability to buy myself a little more time into the future where I didn't have to, get a job per se.
And how did the idea about launching Wallet Hacks come about?
So Wallet Hacks, it's essentially the new personal finance site. So what happened was after I stopped working on bargaineering, I entered in a few other business partnerships, and some of them I'm still doing right now. Others we grew. I just sort of, either lost interest or the business, I guess, kind of lost interest in me, sold those. And I realized what I really enjoyed about blogging were the conversations with readers, was the actual writing process. And so I thought, there's this area, this niche in personal finance where I know a lot of the other people. I have a bit of cachet because I was one of the older sort of bloggers in the space, even though I had taken a couple of years off, why not get back into it? And so I thought it was sort of like putting on a familiar coat. I really like this. I like the people. I like the people that I deal with. I don't have to start from scratch. Why don't I try this again? And so that's why Wallet Hacks is sort of my encore in personal finance blogging.
If somebody wants to start blogging as a career now, what would be your suggestion? Because a lot of newer shiny object or things that have come up, like webinars, summits, podcasts. So what would be your suggestion, somebody who wants to make blogging as a serious career option?
You're right. There's a ton of shiny stuff out there, and some of those things will be here in 2 years. Some of them won't. But I feel like writing as a medium will always be valuable. The only other exception, or the only thing that I would pair that with, is video. I think video is also going to stick around, as well as podcasts. Like audio, video, text, those are the three core. Everything else is a version of that. But with blogging, it's so simple to get started. And when you start, you're going to be very bad. And so it's really important for you to get as much practice as possible by publishing and writing every single day. If you go back and listen or read some of like old school writing like masters, like your Stephen Kings and things like that, like comedians, they always talk about just write as much as you can, because in the beginning you'll be really bad and you need that practice. Too many people try to wait until like the perfect time, and then they wait and wait and wait and wait, and then they never start anything. There's no perfect time if you never start. If you start right now, you're going to be bad, and that is okay, because in a year you'll be so much better. And you don't get better by not practicing, by not doing. And so pick something, pick whatever it is. Don't worry about other irrelevant things that you think are important, like what theme you should get or whatever. Just get something up and just get going and figure out what you enjoy doing, what you don't. You may decide after a couple of weeks of blogging, say every single day, that it's not for you. Well, it's good that you learn that now instead of in a year when you waited for the perfect time. And so then in 2 weeks, if you decide writing's not for you, or if in a month or two, you give yourself a little bit of time to sort of adjust and learn, maybe you go into video and your first few videos are going to be terrible. And that's fine, because that's practice for when no one plays a huge stage the first day, right? They play, if you're a musician, you play in front of your friends, you play birthday parties, you play little clubs, and eventually you move your way up, if you're good and lucky, to a big stadium. So you want to play those little rooms. And by that, I mean, you do videos that are bad. You write blog posts that are terrible, but at least you're writing. So that's my best advice.
What would be the most important metrics as a newbie blogger to check on when he's looking at building his audience? Because, he could be overwhelmed looking at his email list or the visitors and the page views and the number of shares. So what would be the most important metrics he needs to check so that he stays on track at least for a couple of months?
The first thing is get into a habit of constantly writing and focus on a metric that you can control, which is how much you're producing, how many words you're writing, not necessarily how many words you're publishing onto the blog, but just how many you're just outputting, because that's a muscle that you're working and getting stronger and stronger. Like sometimes you'll write something and no one will read it, and that's fine. But eventually after a couple months, once you get really good, you can start paying attention to traffic. Another thing that people I think don't really focus on is the number of conversations they may have with readers, right? Like it's not really that valuable if let's say you have 1,000 visitors a day, but no one comments, no one emails you, no one reaches out to talk to you. That's 1,000 people that just, if you owned a store, it's like 1,000 people walked into the store, picked up some stuff, put it back down, and then left. Are they customers? They walked in your store, but they didn't buy anything. So they weren't really customers. And in fact, they kind of made a mess. And so you got to go clean it up. So it's costing you time. But if you have 2 people that come in, talk to you, ask you about your product, where you get it, what's your favorite, what you can use it with, those are genuine connections that will be valuable, because the person that visited you're just not another store that they walked in and walked out. They built a connection. So to the extent that you can measure that, that's something that I would focus on first before you talk about traffic. Because in the beginning, the traffic will be small, the followers will be small, but the genuine connections, if you have 1 a day in the beginning, that's fantastic. Once you start getting 2 or 3, you eventually will get into a problem where the number of connections each day will be hard to manage, and that becomes a good problem. And then you won't even care about the traffic.
That's great advice. You mentioned earlier that you got some affiliate partnerships. So how can a blogger create and build relationships so that it can be a win-win situation for everybody?
I think that you need to get to a point where you have enough traffic, enough email subscribers, people that you can promote any product, whatever it is, and have it matter to you from a business perspective. It's a mistake to try to do this too early. You get 100 people on your newsletter and now you want to promote some sort of third-party product. And I feel like that maybe that's too early. Right? If you get 5% of the people of the 100. So you get 5 people to buy it. How much money is it? Is it significant? It might be if it's $1,000 product and you get $500 a sale, and those 100 people are all genuine connections. But if they're very tenuous, if they're sort of the tire kickers and the drive-by, visitors, that won't be as valuable. But the mistake would be to focus on revenue when you should be focusing on gaining traffic. There will come a point where companies will see you and will kick down your door to get you to promote their products. That's when you should start thinking about promoting, right? Because you have to recognize from their perspective, each of those reps, they have a limited number of hours in a day, right? They will only pick out folks that they believe will move their internal benchmarks. And they're constantly trying to find new partners, right? Because if they already have a partner, growing them is much harder than finding someone brand new that they feel is bigger than other people realize and may be a good partner. They will come to you. You don't worry about it. When it comes time to make money from the site, people will knock on your door and you'll have to mark emails as spam at that point. That's how aggressive they'll be.
You're writing a new blog, Wallet Hacks. What is the one financial advice you give to people over the years which can help them have financial freedom?
Just listening to your podcast and trying to understand the mindsets and the patterns and processes of becoming an entrepreneur, of starting a business, that's great. In order to do that, it's crucial for people not to waste money on things that don't matter and to save it so that you could invest it in a particular business idea. Invest it in your own time to learn more, to not have to work as much, or at least not feel the pressure to work as much. And part of that is just having a nest egg and saving up money so that you aren't on the margins where you're worried about where, how you're going to pay the next bill or where the next couple of meals are. And you have to do this whether you're doing well or if you're not doing well, because economies change all the time and you never know, people have their hours cut back, things just don't go as well. And it's those times that you need to build up that nest egg so that you can take calculated risks later on, but just don't waste your money on things that don't matter.
How can an average person track his net worth? And do you think tracking own net worth is important?
Yeah, so it's super easy. I use a spreadsheet. I've been doing it for over 14 years now. And I think of it as sort of having an understanding of how much you weigh for your health. I mean, your weight is not the end all or be all of everything, right? Just like your net worth is not the end all and be all of everything. There's so many other sort of numbers in between that are just as important. Like with your health, it's your pulse and your blood pressure and your cholesterol and things like that. But your weight is just something very quick, very easy that you can do to have a good sense of what has changed within the last month or year or whatever. And so I just use a spreadsheet and then I use a couple tools like Personal Capital to sort of pull the data for me. And I do it every month. And I recommend everybody does that because it just tells you what's going on with your money.
Do you suggest any money management tool for people to keep track of their finances and their net worth?
I use a spreadsheet and then I pull the data using Personal Capital. So I have Personal Capital that connects everything together. So I log into one place and then I'm able to see all the accounts in one area instead of logging into the banks and the brokerages and whatever. So I just use those two. And, the spreadsheet has been great. Over 14 years, I've modified it and sort of, customized it to exactly what I need. And it's perfect. I have a template that I can share that people can use and look at to get a good idea. And I have articles that I can share with you guys about how exactly I do it.
Absolutely. We can share it in the show notes. I wanted to know, what are your views on home ownership? A lot of millennials are looking at renting homes and they're not looking at buying property or homes. What are your views about taking either a 30-year or 15-year mortgage? What would you suggest millennials about home ownership, or should they look at rental till the time they have an X amount of funds with them so that they can buy a home?
I don't know why people think that renting is such a bad thing. So we're now in what I consider our forever home where we're going to live for the next 20, 30 years. And we bought it 4 or 5 years ago. And we owned a house before that. It was a smaller house before we had kids. And we bought that in 2005, sort of at the top of the US housing market. And over the years, I thought to myself, you look at all the numbers. I don't know how people got in their heads that buying a house was 100% all the time, much, much better than renting. I mean, renting gives you the flexibility to move almost instantly. To sell a house is kind of a pain. It can take several months, if not years, especially if the market takes a downturn and people aren't willing to pay what you need to get out of it to pay off the mortgage, if you're underwater. I think that anyone that wants to buy a house, you have to think very carefully about the economics and how it will hamper your flexibility in terms of, taking a job in another city, another state, moving, how it impacts your quality of life with the commute to where you work. Like owning a house isn't this automatic like lottery ticket where you own it and after 20 years, you end up on the other side, 100% always good. Like along the way, like things break that you have to replace. And it's not like a magic like potion, anything like that. With regards to the actual finances, like you need to save up a down payment while keeping a little bit of an emergency fund afterwards. Like you don't want to be 100% tapped out once you put the down payment, because if something does happen, you're in big trouble because your emergency fund is depleted. 15 and 30. Personally, I always go with the 30. I know right now, like the interest spreads aren't so big. Like really the trade-off between 15 and 13 is that 15-year fixed mortgages often have a lower interest rate, but it's such a small difference, especially at such low interest rates, that I like the flexibility of a 30-year. And then if you want to pay it down faster, just pay it down faster, but you don't have to. And so that's a flexibility I like. I'm on a 30. And so if we want to pay more, we can, but with such low interest rates, we haven't felt the need to.
That's great advice. I want to know your views about Bitcoin and cryptocurrency. Do you invest into it? It's such a hot topic these days. So what would you suggest to millennials who would be buying more into cryptocurrency without us knowing, where it is headed?
I don't gamble in cryptocurrencies. I think that the whole blockchain and smart contracts is going to be huge. I don't know if Bitcoin or Ethereum or any of the 100 other cryptocurrencies are going to be something that will last. What is like Bitcoin was huge, 18,000 or 50, I don't even know the numbers, but then it fell back down. Like I think people are recognizing that it's so volatile. Unless you recognize you're gambling, like you shouldn't really invest in it. And you don't know what the next big one is and when it's going to be big and when it won't be big anymore. But I think what's interesting is to study how people are behaving, because it gives you in a microcosm, and so not only microcosm, but in such a short time frame, a really good understanding of how people react to sort of these market conditions, right? People think that they're unique, but if you look at Bitcoin, it was the exact same as, say, the dot-com boom, the early 2000s, or the housing bubble. Like people just get crazy and they start doing things that when they look back, they're like, I don't know why I did that. But in reality, it's very clear, like scarcity and everybody getting excited, like people lose their minds. And it's fun to watch, but I'm not going to put any money into it. I mean, I knew people that owned it when they were when Bitcoin, they were a joke. Like imagine if you could get a coin now, or if you could get a coin back in the day for like 10 cents or like 2 cents. Like no one took it as money. You couldn't buy anything with it. Even today, it's hard to buy things with it. And it's like thousands of dollars. But back then, it was so cheap, it was a joke. And now it's too high and too volatile to become a quote unquote investment. I'm enjoying the show and learning from the show, but not getting into it.
Got it. So let's quickly do the top three. What's your favorite business book?
Yeah. So when you asked me, I was thinking, what is a one book that I really enjoyed? And I think that it's from a while back, but Gary Vaynerchuk's jab, 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 right hook, the idea that like you provide a lot of value, which is the jabs, and then you ask for the sale as the right hook, is a powerful lesson. Like we talked about when should you start monetizing and things like that. And I'm like, you should grow until you get to the point where you have no choice but to start, selling your own product or promoting someone else's product. Like you jab until you have no choice but to right hook. And so I think that's a similar message.
If you could go back in time when you started blogging and your business, what is the one thing you would have focused on?
I probably would have tried to hire people faster. I think with the first site, I was the only one writing and doing all the work. And I felt like as someone who was working on it full time, I should be spending 40 plus hours on it. This was transitioning off spending 40 hours at a regular job and then maybe another 20 working on the business. And so I never hired. And so that probably stunted the growth a little bit. It definitely burned me out a little, but I would hire people for tasks that maybe I'm not good at, or that I just feel like with some help, I'd be much better at.
What's your favorite online tool like Gmail or Slack?
I was just going to say, I love Google Analytics. I love numbers and I love studying conversion optimization, like getting, if I'm promoting products, figuring out a way to visually present it in a way that gets people to click and do the things that they themselves want to do. And analytics is great because there's a whole suite of tools. Like their new optimized tool is awesome for A/B testing, and it's completely free. It's amazing.
What is the best way people can reach out to you?
Best way, if you want to connect, I'm on Twitter @WalletHacks, and then just shoot me an email, jim@walletHacks.com. Love to chat with folks.
Hi, Jim. Thank you very much for coming onto the show. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thanks, man. I had a great time. Take care.
Thanks for listening to the Life Self Mastery podcast, where we teach you how to start and grow your online business. For more information, visit Rohit's blog at www.lifeselfmastery.com.